Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions, they just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
Hey everyone, this is Braxton Dutson, your host of Birds and Bees podcast. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist in Salt Lake City, Utah. This podcast is meant to bring you information from top professionals in relational and sexual health. I want you to have all the tools, tips, and tricks you need to improve your relationship with your partner, feel confident in teaching your children about sexual health, and know that none of us are alone in this learning process. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to the Hive. If you're a longtime Hive mate, welcome back. It's great to have you with us once again. Today I'm bringing back Peter Monson for part 2 of this manipulation series. Peter and I talk about the brain and how it loves patterns. You'll learn how to use patterns, support, and the ego to create win-win situations for you, your partner, and child. I thought it was interesting the ways Peter and I teach you how to use self-reflection to create changes as well as improve how you're listening to others. If you're looking for techniques of manipulation, how to spot unhelpful and helpful ways of manipulating, we also get into that towards the beginning of the episode. Peter talks a little bit about parenting techniques, the temptations to force someone to do what you want, and how that affects your relationship long term. How you may have gotten some things done right in the moment, and you accomplish your goal, but what does that do to the relationship long term? Peter answers questions along those lines. It really helps to remember that there's a person behind the actions that tend to irritate us so much. And if we can learn radical empathy, we're able to address those. And we talk about how you can create some of that radical empathy. Have you ever felt manipulated by your teenager or child? Triangulation is one of the manipulative situations that parents find themselves in quite frequently. And we give you tools on how to beat that manipulative technique. Do you remember the movie The Matrix and the woman in the red dress? You know, the one where Neo almost gets shot in that other simulation? Yep, that makes it into this episode as well. The cool part is this teaches us about how we can be redirected to manipulate in a harmful space if we're really not self-aware on what we're trying to accomplish in our communication patterns. The purpose of the series is to help you recognize manipulation, use of manipulation for good, and to check in with yourself so that you're not doing harm to others as you're trying to get your needs met. We kind of start out the episode on a bit of a different foot this week because Peter and I get caught up using a weapon called bug assault, and literally spelled S-A-L-T. We're using that gun to take out a pesky fly that was bothering us during the first episode that kept flying around mics. So we'd love to have you join us on that little bit of a banter. But if that's not your cup of tea and you don't want to hear about how I end up shooting myself in the foot, feel free to, once the interview starts, skip ahead 2 minutes, and the interview, we get into things about 2 minutes into the episode. But I think you're going to like this first part. I love when you send episodes to friends and family. There's a good chance you know someone who could use some extra support or use this information that we're sharing today. Send them a link or tell them about the show and how to get this podcast in their ears. We've had so many different reviews, and I really appreciate everyone who's given that feedback to me. I'm going to read one of them today. This one's from Matthias Allred. He states he gives 5 stars, and the title is Real, Honest, and Fantastic. Thank you, Matthias Allred, for giving us this review. He states, Braxton brings a level of comfort and honesty to a topic that is often hard to talk about. Great principles taught in a way that makes it easier to discuss sex and sexually related topics. Thank you so much for sharing your input with us and for leaving that review. That helps us so much on iTunes, and it just takes a minute to leave a review, and that helps us so much. Thanks for tuning in on birdsandbeespodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio. Join the conversation. Give us a text, 385-449-1818. I'm also taking requests for what the lineup is going to be for 2019, the interviews that are going to be coming on, as well as topics that you want covered. We've had a lot of people talk about consent or want to hear about more about LGBT issues, as well as STDs. There's so many topics to talk about. I want to hear what you want to hear as well. So I'm excited for 2019. Send me a text. Give me a voicemail, 385-449-1818. I'm excited for this interview, part 2 with Peter Monson on manipulation. Thanks for tuning in.
kill a fly.
Kill
yeah,
flies.
like in the famous words of Ron Swanson, don't half-ass anything, whole-ass one thing.
Whole-ass one thing. And for those wondering what we're even talking about, we have a bug assault. That's BUGASALT, the original salt gun.
Probably the best purchase I've made off of Amazon in the last 6 months.
I'll put it in the description where you can get the bug assault.
And the best thing is that Emerson and Aspen love it because if there's, flies in the house, they will go out as like forward observers, find the flies, and then like announce it so I can tactically take the fly out of the game. Like I can't tell you how many hours we've spent with them finding targets for me to hit.
So it builds parental and child relationships. I mean, this thing just
if you want a militaristic parent-child relationship where you're all ready to take on a foreign country, then yes, this is your thing.
Well, I love it. The reason we brought it out is because the last episode we were recording was totally. I mean, there was one fly that was just hanging around Pete's head, and then it
landed on my lip. And I'm like, do I brush it off? Is it gonna go on the mic? I'm gonna sit with it.
There's one part that it did fly right by the mic, and it was like,
have fun editing that out.
Nope, not going to. It's just gonna stay there. But it met its maker.
I think we should just I think you should rack one more round. Yes.
It's all salt loaded.
It's like Rambo if you couldn't hurt anybody.
So if you shot yourself in the foot with this, it's just a sting?
I don't know, Braxton. Why don't you try? I think this is a really good idea. Braxton, I feel like this will be good for you.
Okay, here it goes. 3, 2, 1. Oh,
no, you have to release the safety.
I have to release the safety. Now it's even harder.
And?
It doesn't hurt.
Oh.
It's not from foot, what are we, about 2 feet away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a nice. Now my socks full of salt. Anyways, welcome back to Birds and Bees podcast. We're continuing on our conversation today about manipulation, and actually, this is part 2 of the series we're doing here with Peter Monson. We are talking today about the different techniques of manipulation, like some that you can notice are negative or unhelpful techniques, as well as helpful techniques, building the bridges, being able to get into the win-win, kind of like what we were talking about last time. And we're just going to kind of go into it, talking about how kids tend to use methods of manipulation, how you can helpfully show them different ways to communicate with you, how you as a parent can do the same to your child or with your partner. We want to be able to give you skills and tips to be able to get what you want and not cause the problems or the harm that we were talking about in the last episode.
Exactly.
So I'm excited for this. And we started with shooting me in the foot with salt.
If we didn't do something that was just ridiculous and time wasting, I feel like it wouldn't be us. This is so authentically us. So first, I think we need to talk a little bit about the very real idea that you, through your words, put an input into somebody's brain. Or through whatever kind of input, right? We're going to play a game, and I haven't told you anything about this, have I?
No, okay. I don't know any part of this.
Because I have some context, we have a relationship that we've built, we have rapport. I know a little bit about you.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you think of a word.
Okay.
So, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to play.
Okay, so I want you to say the next word that comes to your brain.
Okay.
Na 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 na.
Thunder.
Exactly. Right? So I put an input in.
You did.
And you had to say thunder.
Oh yeah. It was compulsive.
Yeah. Because you listen to enough AC/DC and your life flitters away.
Yeah.
Realizing that every input we put into a relationship has an effect. We talked about before, I started off my career trained as a U.S. Army interrogator, human intelligence. I wish to say that I am not going to share anything that's top secret. It was a top secret position. Parts of it were. But what I'm going to speak from is a lot of my own experience. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about do draw from that experience in the military, but lots of it draw from my education and my professional experience.
Gotcha.
The brain likes the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oftentimes in a conversation with somebody, you're already thinking up the next thing to say to what they just said. You're not really listening.
Wow. I just did that. You're saying, I'm like, shoot.
I mean, it's...
Got it, yep.
It's kind of how we work. Yeah. You know, you want to... Your brain... lots of people's brains are naturally competitive. You want to win the discussion. You want to look better. You want to feel good. You want something. Mm-hmm. And so lots of times when we talk about manipulation, it comes with an incentive.
Okay. So
one of the first ones that we should talk about is bringing up ego.
Okay.
So
this is the part of you that you really enjoy about yourself, or that when you say stroking your ego or something, it's, wow, you did this really good. You're such a great person. Whoa.
That's laying it on a little bit thick.
Well, it's hardcore ego stroking.
Yeah. Phrasing. Anyway, if we're really talking about it, the idea is the empowerment and the bringing recognition of something that somebody's doing really well. Mm-hmm. One I heard recently was a teacher talking about how do you talk to your kids? How do you talk to your kids in the classroom? And we were having this discussion, and I said, when was the last time that you put out the message that everybody in the classroom does something great? And then individually told them. And this teacher was like, I try to, it's tough. But we run into the same things with relationships. Time, you're tired, just these different things. But if you can get the pattern going with your, significant others, whether children, partners, you really can get that pattern where their brain starts thinking more positively about themselves. So, if I was with my wife, instead of saying, you did the dishes, but you didn't do the counters. And for the record, I'm flipping this around because my job is the dishes and the counters, and this is sometimes what she does to me. Uh-huh. There's two ways that I go about it. One, when I'm tired, when I'm upset, I would do the, why couldn't you do the counters? Mm-hmm. Instead, when I'm in the right space, when I'm really trying to bring her up and show that pattern of love, I can say, wow, I know you had such a rough day today. I know how much you work. You did an awesome job on the dishes. Like, thank you so much for doing that for our family. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't feel like I'm laying it on too thick. Like, it feels that I'm seeing her story and I'm realizing what the sacrifice was, of her taking the time to do the dishes. Yeah. And then I could lead into, hey, so as far as the counters go, what can we do to get the counters done? Do I need to help out? Do you need my help? Just this kind of thing. Because while we love patterns, mm-hmm. the inputs get outputs, we also love to tell our story. There's times that you just really want to speak up. Mm-hmm. And you almost have to bridle yourself back from telling the story of you, when it's not the appropriate time. Yeah. But we all want to tell our stories. And so when you assume the story of a partner, I assumed Bonnie had a really tough day. Mm-hmm. Maybe it turns out she didn't. And I said that. But how would you feel? Like, oh, wow, hey, you know what? I didn't have a rough day, but I like that you acknowledged
that you can see that I do have tough days and that my job is tough, or
right,
whatever it may be for her.
Right.
That means the world to her.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then she probably would be fine talking about what the counters did or didn't do, Mm-hmm. It's emotional setup to then get to the real idea. Because our brains also can't hold two thoughts at once. Yeah. And so if Bonnie and I have worked into the pattern of, man, every time I do the dishes, Bonnie says this about the counters. Yeah. or, it's that idea of whenever I hear dishes and counters in the same sentence, I'm patterned to be like, okay, here it comes, rather than actually listening to the words dishes and counters and all the other words in the sentence.
Gotcha. You lose yourself to the story of what it's been associated with.
Exactly.
Hey, I love that, it's like, oh, you did the dishes. Oh, great. Here we're having the conversation about blah, blah, blah. While you're still talking about what you want to. So we already have this pattern involved, and it's derailing that pattern and being able to stay present with what's going on.
Right. And from personal experience, when this happens, how do you grow? If you're not listening, how do you really grow? How do you see the other person? And so recognizing the pattern helps not only the person who's doing the manipulation, but also the person who's being manipulated.
Say that one more time. So you have the pattern.
So let's say the dishwasher and the spouse.
Dishwasher and spouse.
So the dishwasher needs to do some self-reflection.
Okay.
Of how do I actually receive the message? Am I receiving it just based off of the past history of these same conversations that we keep having? Or am I actually trying to understand what spouse is saying? And then spouse, trying to manipulate dishwasher to do the counters, can say, am I sounding like I usually do? Am I using the same verbiage? Am I saying it in the same way? Am I seeing this person? Am I building that rapport? Or am I just pissed that the counters aren't done and I'm saying whatever?
And I'm just reacting to it in an emotional level.
Exactly.
Definitely. So a ton of self-reflection while you're also trying to have a situation change.
Right. Yeah. Which is really hard because our minds can't hold two things at once.
And it's dealing with an emotional reaction of I work so hard and the counters are never done whenever this and this happens. So that's tough.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we need to recognize that our minds can't hold two things at once. And so by self, kind of checking in with the self before going into a situation, you can really get a lot of the emotion away.
And sometimes that can be hard too, because as you do that, there's a part of you that really wants to be frustrated.
Oh, yeah.
And is like, no, we're walking in and we're going to say exactly what's going on. The counters have not been done in quite some time now, or whatever the story wants to go on. And if you go, I'm not in a really good position to be able to talk about the counters right now. Maybe I should take a deep breath. If I want something to change, we're going to have to approach this in a different way.
Well, and that's kind of the messaging that you're giving yourself, right?
Yeah.
That little voice in your head. And so once again, it's just the manipulation of how am I going to approach this? What is this going to look like? So one of the best ones, in my opinion, is building that person up. Now, on the flip side, there's bringing somebody down. And we see this in a lot of abusive relationships. And there's some ways that you see it that from the outside, it immediately pings in your head like that's not a good relationship.
Yeah.
One of those is working on the hate of things that we're vulnerable about that we talked about in the last episode of pinpointing those things that we don't feel confident about.
Yeah.
And pushing that button. Two ways that I've learned, and you see this all the time in political debates, is one is repetition.
Saying the same thing over and over again? Okay.
And the other is rapid fire. Like
flooding a person?
Yeah, like flooding. It's just so, for example, you've got, dishwasher and spouse. Spouse walks in and says, why aren't the counters done? Dishwasher says, well, I'm getting to him. Why aren't the counters done? Well, I just have to, why aren't the counters done? And it's tough. What do you say? Eventually, dishwasher is going to get to the point where they just break and say, fine, I'll get the counters done. It's just, but the way that it carries is so tough that yes, the counters are done. It's getting that goal. You've manipulated the situation to get the counters done, but you've done immense damage to the other person's view of themselves.
Yeah, so the dishwasher is viewing themselves in quite a negative way of I can't do it right, or I can't do enough, or I should have
Yeah.
there's a lot of damage that happens there.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
Or the flooding, as you had talked about, or as you had named it, is, right, spouse comes into dishwasher and says, I can't believe you didn't get the dishes done. Why didn't you get the dishes done? The counters done. I've always asked you to do the counters. The counters aren't done. We can't have this kind of home. Like, this is just too much. You're really, holding the cleanliness of our home.
Nice things.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Okay, that's the broken one, but that's why we never have friends over or something like that.
yeah. And it's just flood. And because our minds can't hold one thing at once, or more than one thing at once, you get this flood of all these emotional, things that are just, you freak out. Mm-hmm. And then, if you get the goal of the counters being cleaned, you still have this really frazzled, emotionally triggered person cleaning these counters that just doesn't feel like they can release this energy, this, pent up frustration, because they'll just get another flood.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, society,
Then you get overwhelmed and
Yeah.
you start getting down on yourself.
and it can lead to really negative patterns. You've got to release that energy somehow. Maybe you're not doing it in the most healthy way. Maybe you lash out at somebody else, especially a kid.
Yeah.
Kids are so easy to lash out at because they're just sponges. And so when we give a kid too many directions, when we flood them, it's tough. And then they got to go release the energy somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or if we give the kid, like, don't do that. Well, it was just don't do that. Well, I don't do that. It's like, well, now parent doesn't think I can do anything other than just do or not do. Parent thinks I'm not good enough. Parent thinks that no matter what I do, it's just don't do that. It emotionally distances.
And the opposite to that is being able to, so if your child comes up to you and it's like, or why did you do that? And it's like, well, I was just, don't do that. Don't do that. The opposite of that would be listening to them, hearing what there's going. It's like, I understand that you were really curious about doing this. And I told you not to. Do we see what's going on here? Like, now that we've done this, that there's this consequence that's come up. You're okay. I'm glad you're okay. However, there is a consequence for not following directions. Well, I didn't want to know. I didn't know about this and this and this. And you're hearing them and you're like, yeah, I completely understand.
And it gives, that radical empathy gives great opportunity. Maybe your kid really didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But you're so emotionally just frustrated with your kid that you don't want to take the time to be radically, empathetic.
Well, you have your emotions going on too. Your child didn't listen to you.
Of course. I mean,
That's annoying.
I'm no wise saying that I am like the perfect person to follow on this. There's times where it's 8:30 and Emerson will not get his, jammies on. And I'm just like, just do what I say. But if I slow down and realize, hey, like, he's concerned about going to bed, that he has his teeth brushed and his water and his animal, when I can check in with myself, I realize, okay, there's a story, there's a person behind this action. It's not just this action. That's not the goal.
Radical empathy.
Radical empathy.
Love it. One of the other ones I think you were talking about was, oh my heavens, bridge building. No, the upper. I think I even mentioned that in the last one. Is that the upper?
Yeah, that's the upper.
That's the upper.
It's
okay.
Building that person up.
It's the upper. Building the person up. Gotcha.
And the downer,
is downing.
Is taking them down.
Yeah.
Making them feel not, lots of times not worthy. Not, their self-worth is not to your expectations.
Yeah. And you started talking about this in the last one, or even I think you explained a little bit, but the bridge building. Hey, I see. How did you word that? I would like this because of this, and it would benefit the both of us.
Right. So another term that we typically tend to not like is assumption, making an assumption about the partner. Right. You want to hear their story so much, but what about when the other person's not sharing their story?
Yeah.
What do? Assume. Yeah. So how can you assume pretty accurately? Well, they've told you some things in the past. You kind of see how your actions, over the last, let's say you're in a dating situation, you've lived together for 2 years. You've seen how some of your actions, affect them. You've put that input in, and maybe it's not always giving you the output you wanted. Mm-hmm. But you build this rapport, you get these patterns, and you can kind of see where things are working and where they're not. But once you hit that wall of they just won't say anything, they won't go any further, trying to make this choice, then you can look at it and say, hey, I think given this circumstance and given the past, these things are important to my partner. If I use these to explain where I'm coming from, I think I'll connect to what they usually like, to what they usually want. Nice. So is it assuming? Yes. But if it cracks that shell of not speaking, not communicating, and they come out of it and they say, well, actually, you're wrong. Great. You've got, you got a little bit of line. Pull it in.
Come on in.
Yeah. It's manipulation. Say, you know what? Hey, I realize that I don't know what you're talking about and that you're wrong, that I'm wrong. What is it that would work? What does it look like to you if this situation was great? Mm-hmm. And we talked about people wanting to tell their stories. It's the incentive. Mm-hmm. I am now giving you a platform to tell me your story. And of course you want to tell it.
Yeah.
And then there are those times where we're just emotionally not ready to speak.
Yeah, the emotional, okay. The trust. There needs to be some trust involved. Sure. I mean, there could be a lot of hurt. Yeah. Whatever it may, each individual situation, this isn't a pull a lever and things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with humans.
Right.
There's a lot of variables.
Yeah, there's tons. And, and the fun thing, and I say fun because I nerd out about people's choices. The fun thing is that there is no winning. You're never going to get the perfect response because your perfect response is so much different than somebody else's perfect.
Oh, nailed it. Yeah, for sure.
So you're going to get the response that you're going to get, and you got to meet it where it is. You got to say, oh, that was the response. Well, yeah, wow, I need to self-reflect now too. It's just when manipulation is done in such a way that the intent is great and you've taken into account the other variables, it can be such a growing experience for the person that's trying to manipulate, mm-hmm. as well as the person that's being manipulated.
Yeah. Learning yourself because you're reflecting on what is coming up. And there might be some truth. It's like, I don't want to open it up to you because I feel like you judge me for things. That can react and be, I don't judge you.
Yeah, that is one reaction. The other reaction could be like, wow, actually, I think I do judge you
exactly.
sometimes.
One is the vulnerable piece. The other one is I'm going to meet you with defensiveness. I just want you to do what I want you to do.
Exactly. And that's where we go back to the Thor versus Superman kind of thing.
Yep.
It's like, is the goal a better world that
mm-hmm.
these two actors are in, or is the goal to get what you want?
Yeah.
So.
Completely. When someone's using this, would you say the opposite of this, when someone's asking for the assumptions, is using the assumptions and sticking to what those assumptions are?
Yes.
That it becomes the harmful, I'm now putting you down because, well, assuming.
Yes. Yeah. We see this a lot with the relationship between teenagers and parents.
Yeah. Do tell.
For example, because I'm just trying to use my own experience.
Uh-huh.
I was so into emo, like dashboard
emo
confessionals. Yeah, it was a bad time. It happened. Go aughts. But yeah, I did the whole dye my hair black thing. Mm-hmm. I, unfortunately was cutting my arm. I wanted so much to feel something because of this depression that I was trying to work through, that I felt flat. I felt nothing. Mm-hmm. And one of my parents freaked out and was like, are you doing drugs? Are you who are your friends that you're running around with? I had great friends. I didn't do drugs ever. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to deal with this depression. I didn't know the healthy way out of it. But they stuck to that assumption that obviously I was doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. And they were going to make sure that I was disconnected from everything because they wanted to make sure I didn't do anything wrong. Well, in fact, like, connection was exactly what I needed. But sticking to that assumption rather than giving a space for the child's voice, it really did some damage. Now, the other parent dealt with a little bit differently. When they found out, they just took me for a drive. And we didn't talk. They turned on NPR, which I grew to love as an outlet. And we just listened to Wait, Don't Tell Me. There was no assumption. There was no nothing. It was just, hey, I don't get what you're going through, but I get that you just need a little bit of space. And I'll be right here. Mm-hmm. I felt calm. I finally felt something. I was manipulated into feeling something, which was exactly what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, you got to let go of those assumptions, but you also need to learn how those assumptions can lead into something that can be positive.
Yeah, and it goes back into if the parent, the one that took you on an NPR ride, was like, this hinges on how good of a parent I am, you're going to react in an emotional way and try and force what a good parent looks like, what your version of a good parent is.
Right.
My child will not do X. Mm-hmm. My child will do this. Mm-hmm. Good parents make their children blah.
Yeah.
If you can look back at yourself or even look at yourself and go, am I forcing something because I want my child or my spouse to act a certain way to make me look like a good parent, a good partner, whatever it may be? That's a great time to go, I need to check what my motives are.
Well, and that's why learning positive manipulation is so healthy.
Yeah.
Because then you have to check in with yourself. You have to say, how are my consequences, or how are my actions going to affect others? What's the consequence before you even go into the situation?
Good call. Yeah.
I mean, it's like saying, okay, we'll do all these things, but don't do them, but only when they work, but not work. You know, like it
doesn't work that way.
No. And whenever we're trying to, use a power structure over someone else, there's a very good chance, in my experience, that your intent might not be all the way there.
Yeah. That you're trying to gain power and control over someone else.
Yeah.
Or over a situation.
Yeah.
When it comes to that, so this is where I've been excited to ask you this about the triangulation of when kids, this is, I know this happens in relationships where the parents or the caregivers are in the same home. I do see, and this is just anecdotal, I don't have any research on this, but I do see an increase when it comes to divorced parents or separated parents, where we've got a child that's bouncing between two adults. And that can be in home, that can be if parents are separated, whatever it may be. But the triangulation, can you tell me about how triangulation works?
Yeah, so triangulation is a fantastic way to manipulate two systems of power.
Yeah.
Right? So if you are, let's say, the child, and you want to get whatever it is you want, like let's say you want to go sleep at your friend's house, but parent A won't let you. Parent B won't let you. All right? So you're not going to get out.
No.
But if you can turn these two systems of power on each other, then they will be so caught up in their fighting that you're good. Like run away to your friend's house, So oftentimes between separated parties, and granted, I kind of talk about this from political military scheme.
Yes.
Which
by all means is essentially what we're talking about with
just knock down, drag out. And from my friends that have had really rough divorces, this is very true. And I've also got friends who have had really amicable divorces. And it's like they're so on the same page that their kids just go, I'm not going to get away with this. I'll stop. So power structure A and power structure B, when they separate, oftentimes have a lot of old wounds that they haven't taken care of because of the history. Right? And they want to get back. You want to manipulate. You want to just, make
that hurt happen.
Yeah. And so power structure A the child can approach and say, look, I know you don't want me to go, spend the night, but power structure B is telling me I can. And so I don't know if you want to talk to them or not. I know you really, you get really upset when everybody doesn't agree. And I don't want to drive a wedge between you. The assumption of exactly what the other person's feeling. But, I just thought you should know what power structure B is doing. Mm-hmm. Well, then, oh man, you just emotionally triggered something. You go after power structure B, and the child can slip away.
Can slip out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same exact thing as kind of, World War II. You had all these power structure fighting, mm-hmm. and the U.S. was like, no, we're good. Like, if you want to fight Germany and Germany wants to fight over here and you guys get Britain, we're still good. Like, I'll just stay out of it. And it wasn't until it touched and they realized, we got to get in this. And that's a very simple way of looking at it. But the triangulation really is just, and sometimes parents will use the child against power structure, A, or, when everybody can be on the same playing field, mm-hmm. it gives peace a much better chance.
Yeah, that's what I think I see the most of, is not so much the child that's going, well, Dad, lying about the power structure B, mm-hmm. wanting something that isn't really there,
yeah.
but mostly playing on power structure A and saying, oh my gosh, if you loved me, or something maybe not as extreme, but just like, I really want to do this. And, I never get to do something along these lines. And it's like, and there's a way for either to poke power structure B and being like, oh, I know they don't like this, but I'll let you do it this time and gain favor.
Yeah. It's a false sense of trust and rapport.
Yes.
Because whenever it's built on negative manipulation, it can be taken away right immediately.
Uh-huh. And used as counter manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you don't hold those boundaries, it can really hurt. And you see countries that do that too. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, we will pay you to stop this war. Well, what happens when the money runs out? Like,
the war starts.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you can't, like the whole mafia will protect you for as long as that money keeps coming. Like, from what? Well, just from if and anything were to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, well, crap, there's no way out of this.
Right. So the idea that when two countries have fantastic boundaries, they have peace accords, if that's what you want to call it, between a divorced couple, a peace accord.
A peace accord.
Have good boundaries, have a common goal, exchange information very quickly and very precisely. Mm-hmm. Nobody can pull one over on them.
Because they're in communication. Mm-hmm. They've got similar goals, or at least they're understanding what their role is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's always political nuances, but the fact of the matter is, because they're so interwoven in each other's goals, if somebody tries to play one off the other, it's like, nope. Mm-hmm. No, I know where they are. I don't know who you, the outside actor, are, and I'm going to trust the person that I know.
Yeah. Is there a way that when there has been hurts for a parent, so say a parent is like, no, these are our hardcore goals or rules in the house, and the other parent is more permissive, and they're like, well, I don't think that works very well. Is that a point in time where both need to come to the bridge building and saying, like, power structure A is very authoritarian, working on, we've got to do this and this and this and this and this, and these are the rules I expect over at your house, power structure B's house.
Right.
Power structure B's like, that's ridiculous. My child can go to sleep at midnight on the weekend instead of 10:30.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, we're having a problem. One is kind of held back of like, well, whatever, neener. And the other one is like trying to gain power control over something they don't have control over. Is there a way to meet both of those or to restructure that? Yeah,
there is a way to restructure it. Oftentimes in our democratic two-party system, we see when kind of this respectful discourse, debate kind of thing starts favoring one opponent instead of the other. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when you're kind of back on the ropes, then you start putting out these assumptions of, well, you should do this. You know, the incumbent has been doing this for so many years. They should be doing this. You don't have any idea what's going on in their party, in their house. You don't know, but it breaks down the respect. Mm-hmm. So the best thing that can be done is saying, that's what they do. This is what I do. Let's sit down. Let's talk it out. Mm-hmm. And there are going to be those core anchoring values that I'm not going to let go of. And I know they've got those core anchoring values that they're not going to let go of. But right now, it is so angry and so tense that anything improving on this, even if it's a small step, is better than nothing.
Yeah.
So in politics, maybe that's two candidates coming together and say, hey, we are not going to use attack ads. Mm-hmm. We're not going to, call each other names. Great. That is better than it was. As far as with parents, co-parenting, I have a friend who they went through a rough divorce, but got great kids, and there's things her ex-husband does that she just hates, mm-hmm. but they're not a big enough hill to die on. So her way she manipulates is goes in and says, hey, you do that really big thing that hurts me. I don't like it, but I realize your values, your core beliefs are different than mine. Mm-hmm. In that case, can I have this?
In that case, I would like this that you don't like so much.
But it's messing with that idea of, I know I'm not going to get the perfection that I want, so maybe I can manipulate this by calling the other person's mind back to this thing that they do. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge, big thing. I aggrandize it. I say, I know everything about what you're doing. It's terrible. Can I just have this little thing on the side?
Please.
I'm not saying it's the healthiest way to go about it, but over time they become more and more open to changing the little things, which add up to a big thing.
Yeah.
And that's mutual respect.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there ways to go about teaching kids these positive manipulations?
Yeah.
Is it through educating? Is it through just pure showing? What thoughts do you have on that?
My thoughts on that are consent.
Consent.
Yes. Okay. Because consent for anything, for someone to get your consent when originally you're like on the fence of giving it or not giving it, mm-hmm. means there was a shift in choice. There was a manipulation. If you hold to your consent and say, I'm not going to consent to, have sexual relations with you unless I know you are using protection. Mm-hmm. Either they're going to use protection or they're not. And if they don't, you have your consent, you don't give it, and you walk away. Mm-hmm. It's that same idea that nobody can manipulate you unless you allow them to get their final goal out of you. Mm-hmm. So you can hold a conversation. They can say, oh, but I don't like using a condom. It feels weird. It's, don't you love me? Don't you care about how I feel when we have sex? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. But I'm not going to give my consent unless we're using protection.
Yeah.
It holds a firm line, and it says that you have power. You have power over you and your choices.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. And even with our 5-year-old, we talk about consent. He's got this friend who talks about having, these big magic powers, and they're the best thing in the world. And he gets scared about it. My son gets scared that his friend's going to use these made up magic powers. Uh-huh. I can't make my son believe that magic powers are false. Mm-hmm. But I can say you have the consent to play with this kid or not.
Wow.
You can go up to him and say, hey, I don't like you talking about your magic powers. If we're going to play, we're not going to use magic powers today. And if he does, walk away. Mm-hmm. Go play with somebody else. This is your choice. You always have a choice, no matter how, fear-based or scary or whatever. You always have a choice. Mm-hmm. We hear about One of my favorites is John McCain.
Yeah.
POW for years and years. And he talks about having that choice where he could either just kind of succumb to this terrible situation and let it get into him, or he could try and stay as happy as he can, make jokes. The beatings weren't going to stop.
Yeah.
But he had the choice about whether he was going to internalize this or not. And it's just really powerful.
That is powerful. To be able to have that consent of what do I want, and then being able to teach your kids that they have choice. They have power and choice. And that's hard too, because you have to teach them they kind of have power of choice with you.
Yep.
To a certain degree, but really for the whole thing, like you're teaching them to be adults, even as a 5-year-old.
You kind of have to.
Yeah.
And lots of times I feel like, am I exposing him to too much by saying he has power and choice? Am I going to lose power as a parent?
That's probably the scariest thing right there.
And it is very scary.
Yeah.
But the idea is I can either set him up to make proper decisions through trial and error at home, and then say, okay, take what we've learned through trial and error and go out into the world. Or I can say, you're doing this at home, you're doing this outside of it, go. And to me, I want to raise somebody who understands that he has power and choice.
And that takes a lot of effort. That's a lot of effort and a lot of thinking and listening.
And it's a lot of mistakes, too.
It's a lot of mistakes.
It's a lot of mistakes. Where come back and he's like, but Dad, you said that I couldn't do that. And I'm like, well, I said this, but you always have a choice. Just make the one I want you to make. Please. Don't do this. And I'm really privileged to have a great kids, but they think about their choices. They worry about it. I think we all do. And the earlier we can expose that needing to think about your choice before you make it, I think it's setting them up for success.
I completely agree with you. When you put the effort up forward at the beginning, and that then you got to deal with what your again, the great power and the great responsibility. You give them a lot of responsibility, and then they get to choose what they're going to do. So if you're teaching, I constantly hear this with parents, and this is probably the hardest because it is so value driven, and I get it. But I don't want my son or my daughter to have sex before they're married or before a very long relationship or whatever it is. But a lot of it's the marriage part, and we can't get anywhere close to that. And I'm not saying one or the other is right or wrong. I'm just saying that if you're teaching them to have consent, and they get to make their own choices, and they get to work through their decisions on what's okay and what's not, there's going to be some uncomfortable conversations you will have with them. And then ultimately they get to decide what they're okay with and what they're not. And that may be not what you're all right with. And how do you deal with that yourself?
I can share my experience. I grew up in a very strict religious household, and sex before marriage, you were not going to do it. It was pounded. That was our sex education, was abstinence. I remember we had an anatomy book, and I looked at it one time and felt terrible about myself, so I closed it. Sex was bad.
Yeah.
And so then I got married, and I'd never had sex before, and it was a rough experience. Because all of a sudden, something that had been so bad, I was just supposed to go for it, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I post that up against, what if somebody had told me, if you're going to have sex before marriage, here's what you need to know. Because of my personal beliefs and my personal religious beliefs at the time, I probably wouldn't have had sex with marriage or before marriage. But when I did have sex within a marriage, I would have been a lot healthier. It would have taken years of, working through things with my spouse away. I could have had so much more comfort in my own relationship. Is it hard to talk to your kids about sex? Yes. Is it hard to talk about consent? Is it kind of an abstract idea that maybe you yourself might even not all know the nuances of? Yes. Does that mean that you don't try? No.
Exactly.
The work that you put in the front to manipulate your child into thinking that, hey, this is something that might happen, but might not. Either way, I need to be prepped for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then slowly saying, hey, here are some of the reasons that I don't feel like it's okay to have sex before marriage. I want you to make your own decisions. But just so you know, this is where I am at it. It's so empowering.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that that's going to make it so your kids won't have sex before marriage.
No, there's no guarantee.
No. But there is a guarantee that you provide them with the correct education. You explain to them your values. If your kids are adhering to the same religious beliefs that you are, you explain it in a non-fear-based way so that they're not afraid. They're either going to responsibly go into sex before marriage or they're going to comfortably go into sex after marriage.
Mm-hmm. And all these things come to even what's uncomfortable if you've got your child that's participating in sexually related activities, such as, we're talking holding hands. Intimate building, things that build relationships, holding hands, kissing, making out, cuddling, things along those lines that can scare parents to where we tend to get the dad's like, well, I've got my shotgun ready. Like that's where we jump to in the joking, but sometimes some parents are quite serious. Like I'm going to use a scare technique.
Sure.
Where if you can have that connection and build that connection with them, there's going to be times where they've held hands with someone that they didn't really want to. Or maybe they got a kiss and they didn't like what they felt. Those are beautiful ways to be able to bring up, what about that did you not like? What about that made you uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. If you had a chance to change that, what might you think in the next one? What in the next experience? What do you want to have? What do you want to experience? You're creating what I do want, how I would like this, time frames, and you also get to insert your values into that. Like, wow, see, it seems as though, I hear that this felt too fast, and I think I agree. Those, we move really quick in relationships. This is one of the reasons why we say, let's not have sex before marriage because of this and this.
Yeah.
That is a manipulation technique.
Of course.
It's also you putting in your values, which is completely okay, but it's also not saying, well, see, if you just wouldn't touch boys and you wouldn't, go after the girls, then you wouldn't have this problem. Like, maybe you should listen to me more.
Yeah. And that is so fear-based. And
it is.
It's not building the person up. And in some cultures, you really don't touch hands with the opposite sex until the time comes. But, you got to think about how are you explaining that in a positive manner, if that's what your culture is. If you're explaining it, it's the same thing. It's not going to change. If that's your culture and that's the constant, if it's not going to change, then change the messaging around it. If sex before marriage is the constant, which we could go into that for a while, but change the messaging, change the manipulation tactic. I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah. And if you find yourself using these techniques, like you're using manipulation techniques that aren't as helpful or that cause fallout or problems afterwards, and you're sitting here listening to this being like, oh crap, I'm a bad parent, I'm a bad partner.
No.
Let's stop right there. That's not what this is for. It's not to point out, wow, you're doing this bad, you're doing that bad, or look at your friend and do this. That's shame. Let's stay away from the shame. This is not to point out this. This is to bring awareness to you, to your friends, to your children, so that you can take that awareness and now act on it. Let's start making changes. Look up positive ways to interact.
Well, and if we want to go back to the MCU, Black Panther, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're a good man with a good heart, and it is hard for a good man with a good heart to be king. Like, you have power. Just simply by having the ability to communicate. How are you going to do that?
Yes.
You have to think about this. And it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much easier to just go off and not think about how you're manipulating the world around you. So much easier. I unfortunately did it for a lot of years. It broke a lot of bridges. It made a lot of trauma around people around me. But it's because I learned how to manipulate before I learned how to be responsible with my manipulation. When we look at our own power, and the responsibility we have at it, and we take that seriously, I believe we are so much better primed to be in relationships, to be parents, to be out there spreading the message than when we're ourselves not caring about our responsibility. So to a parent who feels shame for this, I would say, please don't take what we're saying as shame. Please, if you feel like you've been, negatively manipulating people around you, take it as an introspection. Take it as that mirror to say, do I do this? Do I not do this? What do I want my messaging, my manipulation to be?
Love it. I think it's a great way to go about it.
I never asked you, I don't think. Are you a Batman guy or a Superman guy?
I think total Batman.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm Batman when it comes to that.
I thought we were going to have to end our relationship.
You're going to have to try and... I see that you like guys that are dressing up and have a ton of money. Or no, that their costume changes happen really quick with their glasses. Batman has glasses sometimes. Manipulate me back into the good side. I just love... I think it was just a little bit too much for me to have Man of Steel, can fly, laser beams. I love the Fortress of Solitude. I kind of thought that was kind of a cool place. But besides that, I was like, oh, okay, kryptonite. We have maybe small particles of that here on Earth. Maybe. I thought Batman's super cool. It's like, he has all the cool cars. It seems maybe more relatable to me. And he can lose.
You know what? That's what I was going to say. I probably thought too deep as a kid, but had lots of time and lots of dashboard confessionals and comics around. But the thing I love about Batman is he won't take a life. Like, that's his core value. He will not take a life. Superman comes, does the destruction, goes to his Fortress of Solitude, and feels guilty. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a perfect response to knowing your power and seeing the responsibility you have. Yes, Batman is fragile. He's human. He breaks like everybody else. Superman isn't. What are you going to do with that power? Are you going to say, okay, I'll never take a life, even though it might need mine? Or are you going to say, well, I'm going to do what I have to stop the bad guy. And then I'll go feel bad about it later and shame and guilt. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I always felt like I could relate with Batman in just the idea of, I will know my power. I will know what I can and can't do. And I will make sure that even if it means I have to look at myself and see where my morals are from time to time, I'm going to make sure that I'm only doing good, that I'm only impacting for the best.
And that can leave open rooms for when you're like, I didn't do that. And that's hard. That's difficult to see, and it can be very, very uncomfortable.
But that's part of the human experience.
It is. It is. Be comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of manipulation,
Yeah, it sure is. Are there any others off the top of your head you feel like we need to go over? It seemed we covered a lot.
We did cover a lot. The only thing that I would say, the last one, is it's iconic throughout film, is the woman in the red dress.
Okay.
And I promise.
The Matrix.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking too. Right? Neo's standing in a room, everybody's dressed in black, and this beautiful woman walks past in a red dress. He sees it, all of a sudden he turns, and everything's shifted.
Yeah.
Everything's gone negative because he was playing into the pattern. Mm-hmm. The last thing I would say to people would be realize that politics, advertising, these different things that are throwing information out at you are wanting you to not look at yourself first. They're wanting you to follow the pattern that you've had your entire life. Ooh, there's that big red flashy thing. I'm going to look at that. Mm-hmm. You always have a choice, but you have to check in with yourself first. I follow news way too much. I love news. But when I'm sitting there on my phone looking at news, it's addictive. And if I'm sitting there and my daughter is trying to talk to me and I'm looking at news, I got to check in with myself. That quick distraction, there's another new story. For me, I've really had to come to a space where I say, I am being manipulated. My core value is that I love my daughter. Is this getting in the way of my core value? How do I take power that I have and not give it to others or other systems or other, whatnot, and keep it within myself so that I can steer myself on the path that I want to be on? And that's definitely a tactic. It's all around us. I think it's so much easier to engage emotionally online, whether I'm in a Facebook fight, or whatnot. It's so much easier than to say, wow, I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to find a way, even if I have to do some work, to go find somebody I can emotionally engage with.
Yeah, definitely.
It's easier to plug out.
I think that comes back to your question earlier of what is the normal, or what does Google say that is the normal amounts of sex that people should be having during the week. It plays right into what can I use in order to make things my way, or am I normal? And if I'm not normal, or if this isn't normal, how do we get to be normal, and how can we make, and we got to be okay with saying this is what's okay for me, and what's going on for me.
It's like the word should. I despise the word should.
It comes up so much.
There's so much guilt, so much blame, so much questioning. Well, you should be having sex 2 to 3 times a week. You should be wearing this. Your body type should be this.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that triggers a lot of emotions really easily, really fast. It's a great way for somebody to then input what they want into your thinking. For me, if should comes up in any conversation, that's when I tune out. That's when I'm like, I know exactly what you're doing. I am done. But yeah, I mean,
it's a good trigger word to catch, even as we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, I do it to myself all the time.
Oh, we all do.
I should have this job. I should have this much money. I should, be on this career path. I should,
Shit all over yourself. That's what happens. That stuff stinks.
That came so close to you needing to edit this out.
Well, I do. I use that on purpose. I'll even use that with clients. I'm like,
really?
Are you shitting on yourself? And they're like, huh, what?
Kind of manipulated.
Yeah, I do. It reboots whatever we were talking about, in the sense of like, you keep saying all these shoulds, and it just sounds like should is everywhere. Yeah. You're shitting on yourself. You're shitting on others. And I use it for that because of how stinking close it sounds to that word. And it helps people remember. And I found that as in this manipulation technique, that they start to go should, and then they're like, oh, am I shitting on myself? Because it's such a close relation to should and our fun swear word.
Yep. You're reformatting the brain to have a new input, but with a different cause.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Look, you're a manipulator already.
Manipulating all the way. It's kind of like what Reva Cook just a couple episodes said. She said she has clients that'll start going down the Yabbit trail. Where they're like, yeah, but. She's like, no, Yabbits eat carrots. I was like,
wow.
Hopping down the Yabbit trail.
I think I'm going to remember that.
I've never forgotten it. I'm like, Yabbits eat carrots, or Yabbits eat cabbage. And so it restructures the, oh my gosh, I could do this. Yeah, but, or someone says something like, yeah, you're a great person. Yeah, but I don't have, yep, Yabbits are for carrots. What am I going to accept? What am I not going to accept? So I think it's kind of fun, those word associations.
Well, you do. I mean, you have amazing people on this podcast all the time, and I'm just really honored to be one of them. So,
well, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your feedback on that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are, I'm glad that you've been here with us, and thanks so much for being a part of the Hive and for being a Hive mate. All of us are doing this together, and we want to keep growing together. So thanks so much. We'll see you in the next episode. interview? Man, I love interviews like this. Remember, we love when you send these episodes to your friends and family. There's a good chance you know someone who could use some extra support or the information that was just discussed in this last episode. Send them a link, tell them about it. You can send it through iTunes, send them the birdsandbeastpodcast.com link. Any way that best will get them the information, and it can help a lot to those that you love. We really appreciate you sharing this. Please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. That helps us immensely with getting this content out. And know that I love you. Love the fact that you guys are helping me out with my goal in sharing this information with the entire world and changing the way that we talk about sexual health and changing the interactions we have with our kids as well as our partners. If you have any questions or you want to join the conversation, send me a call or give me a text at 385-449-1818. Send me an email, birdsandbeastpodcast@gmail.com. All this is going to be great. Love to hear from you, Hive Mates. And I look forward to talking with you guys in the next episode. So until then, keep the sexual health buzz alive, and I'll see you in the next episode.